At the center of the press's shifting role in American politics and culture. Gay Talese got his start as a copy boy and a sports reporter at the New York Times. He hustled his way into covering more serious stories, sending him to places like Selma during the 1965 protests, where Talese reported what he saw to a national audience, like marchers facing down the threat of violence. Quote, "There were young blondes in polo coats and hipsters with beards. There were white faces and black faces, ministers' collars and turtleneck sweaters. They differed in age and religion, but shared a unity of purpose. They'd come to march through the streets of Selma." He wrote, "A young man with a short blonde beard yelled at Dr. King, 'You son of a bitch, you want to vote? Why don't you act like a human being?' Dr. King said nothing. What tomorrow? Nobody knew." End quote. Reflecting later on that reporting, Talese says he was dissatisfied with much of his writing, noting, "I wish I could think of better words to describe what I had seen, even though in a fully understood and enduring sense, I was not really sure what I had seen, beyond the sadism and suffering along the highway." But Talese felt that his independence from elites was an advantage.
When I was a young journalist, we were of the underclass, and we would approach them as we were looking from the outside in to a world of privilege and power and affluence.
Talese bore down on privilege and power. Who had it? Why? Who was trying to take it? He charted how television changed the culture and created new stars, writing, "It was not that television was slanting the news, but that the newsmakers were slanting themselves to television. That shaped who the elites were and the language they spoke." Talese also had a knack for cutting through spin and PR. His iconic Esquire profile, Frank Sinatra Has a Cold, is considered a masterpiece of new journalism because it revealed Sinatra's world through people around him, even though Talese had virtually no access for an interview with the star himself. Talese says the real story isn't always about the so-called big people.
All these little stories are really big stories if you think big about little people. And that's what I like to do.
I thought there were so many interesting people, not important people necessarily, not people who would make news, but people who were part of newsmaking, or at least part of the miracle of daily journalism.
Gay Talese, the miracle of daily journalism, an honor to have you here.
And for me to be here.
You look at this era, what I wanted to do with the benefit of your presence was look at some of the different presidents, because you've seen so much. Take a look at Lyndon Johnson, talking about the press and its role in those heightened times of Vietnam.
We believe very strongly in preserving the right to differ in this country and the right to dissent. And if I have done a good job of anything since I've been president, is to ensure that there are plenty of dissenters. And there's not a person in this press corps that can't write what he wants to write, and most of them do write what they want to write.
What do you see there?
I remember how strong the press, especially the New York Times that I knew best, was against Johnson and his war. David Halberstam, for example, who won the Pulitzer Prize in 1964 at the New York Times covering Vietnam, was loathed within the White House of Johnson as well as his predecessor, John Kennedy. In fact, John Kennedy, in 1962, went to the published New York Times to try to get rid of, or 63, tried to get rid of Halberstam, tried to move him out of Saigon.
Ousted, yeah.
Ousted. And you know, the history of the presidency and the press is one of an adversarial relationship, if not a sense of loathing entirely. I mean, there's not a president that liked the press. Roosevelt hated the New York Times, Franklin Roosevelt. And Truman, you know, what he did with a music critic that didn't like his daughter Margaret's way of singing. I mean, what we have now in the White House of Trump is not to be singled out as a special case of the president feeling he's being persecuted or trying to point his own rancor on the press itself. It's an old story.
An old story. So let me play some of Donald Trump, some of this from when he was a candidate, personally singling out reporters, even making light or making fun of one's handicap.
Nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said. There's something happening. They're not reporting it, Katie. You're not reporting it, Katie. But there's something happening, Katie.
Does it concern you, or do you see it as really of a piece with the history?
Well, it concerns me, but on the other hand, as a journalist, and I still am at 85, not as lissome as I was at 25, but still active in my own ambition as a journalist. I see this president as representing what we loathe, but also I do believe that his persona, his face, is a face of America that is real, but we just do not want to condone and shouldn't.
Who is we?
Donald Trump is America. It's not the America that we want to elevate or even appreciate, but there is much of him throughout this country. It's not something we wish to extol or appreciate or accept, but it's here. There are many, many Donald Trump faces in this country. He speaks to a constituency that is not the kind of people that you wish to associate with, you, me, anybody, but there really is an anger in this country, and there's a sense of isolation in this country.
You think the political establishment didn't want to believe that the support was out there for him?
I believe that. I believe that, and I believe that the journalists of your generation, as opposed to mine, which goes back 50 years, we were very different in my time as journalists compared to the ones today, because we were much more aware of the low, basic, sometimes despicable character of our country, because many of us came out of a rough and tumble or down and out life. We journalists of the post-World War II period, of which I'm a part, I started in 1953, 54. We were of the underclass. We were of the class that, in 2 generations later, will vote for Trump.
You didn't identify exactly the same way that reporters can be so cozy. You talk about your craft. I was reading this. I want to read it to you. You said why you don't like to use a tape recorder in your writing. You said, recording an experience can prevent the insight that comes from deep probing. Reporters who use a recorder instead of being in the moment risk generating only a first draft drift of the mind, symptomatic of a society permeated by fast food, computerized, bottom line, and personalized workmanship, reducing the once artful craft of writing to the level of talk radio on paper. I wonder what you think of a world where so many people go to a concert and they try to video record it. So they don't actually watch it, they just watch it through the video, and whether we're losing something tactile here.
Yeah, I do think, as a senior citizen of journalism, that we are losing a lot. When I first was a young man of your age, I got a job in the old-time reporter. When I first walked in the New York Times, my first day as a rookie reporter, he said, young man, stay off the telephone. The telephone in my time, 1950s, was the new technology. He said, you have to show up. You have to see the people's faces. Be there, be there. I don't care. Well, right now, in the grandchildren, comparably, people are looking at their smartphone, and the life is through the laptop, and there isn't that discovery by chance of wonderful characteristics of the story.
Right.
There's so much that's focused on getting it fast, getting it first, not necessarily getting it all, but getting it to a degree right, but to a degree incomplete. Listen, keep it up, but it's a hard work you're doing, hard work.
Gay Talese, thank you. This is wonderful. I appreciate it.
Great.
Welcome to tonight's edition of Normal or Not. We are looking at part of the Russia story that gets less attention, that nation's interest in the GOP platform. Russia had 2 goals in 2016. First, thwart Hillary Clinton in the election. But second, even if Trump didn't win, we're told Russia wanted to use the Trump campaign itself to tilt Republican politics towards Russia. Now, the first goal gets the most attention. We hear a lot about the election. The second one is critical, though, because it shows how the influence campaign may have worked before Election Day. And that brings us to this obscure campaign entity, the GOP Platform Committee. Now, party activists often use it to rubber stamp the core positions held by the party. But in 2016, there was a fight over a plank in the platform that seemed strange at the time and even stranger today. At this month's historic hearing with FBI Director Comey, Congressman Adam Schiff referred to this incident. And keep in mind, he is privy to top secret intel, so he's not likely to make claims without evidence.
Ambassador Kislyak, who presides over a Russian embassy in which diplomatic personnel would later be expelled as likely spies, also attends the Republican Party convention and meets with Carter Page and additional Trump advisors J.D. Gordon and Waleed Faris.
Schiff describing their Russian officials at the convention and noting how those same Trump aides oversaw the platform.
Just prior to the convention, the Republican Party platform is changed, removing a section that supports the provision of lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine, an action that would be contrary to Russian interests. Manafort categorically denies involvement by the Trump campaign in altering the platform. But the Republican Party delegate who offered the language in support of providing defensive weapons to Ukraine states that it was removed at the insistence of the Trump campaign.
That delegate Schiff was referring to, a former Reagan appointee, is named Diana Denman. She had proposed the basic language that the U.S. should provide lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine in its fight against Russia. But she says Trump officials intervened to kill that policy, and they had denied that for months until March, when Republican operative J.D. Gordon confirmed to CNN that he advocated for the successful platform language that the Ukrainians not be armed in their battle against pro-Russian separatists. Denman says Gordon not only killed the amendment, but did so while having an animated phone call with what he described as the highest levels of the Trump campaign in New York. She would not specify if that meant Donald Trump herself. Was that normal? Reporter Allegra Kirkland probed whether this happened for, say, policies regarding any other country on earth. Asked if she recalled Trump staffers intervening to table any other amendment put before the National Security Committee, Denman said that's the only one. So the only topic the Trump campaign intervened on was about Russia. And the change they wanted was to go soft on Russia, so the platform, up to today, it now offers only, quote, appropriate assistance to the armed forces of Ukraine, not military aid against Russia. And the Trump campaign officials demanding that change say they were acting on the direct authority of some of the highest levels of the campaign. Now, I called Diana Denman and asked her about how high this went. She said at the time J.D. Gordon was citing such a high-level authority on the campaign, she didn't really believe him. Here's what she told me. I thought he was perhaps overreaching his pay grade, so I asked him 3 times. I asked him very definitely who he was talking to, and he gave me the same answer all 3 times. I really didn't believe him. But given what she knows now, Denman told me she does now believe what he said then, that he was speaking about watering down this Russia amendment to someone in the highest levels of the campaign. I should tell you, we did invite her on the show today, but given these open inquiries, she's currently declining TV interviews. Investigators may want to know a lot more about this. Who was on that line in New York? Why did they care so much about softening military threats against Russia? And had Russian officials formally requested this change from Trump aides? And did they ask for anything in return? To be clear, we don't have all the answers, but the fact that these questions are swirling around a change to the platform to benefit a foreign country at the center of what is now a criminal inquiry into its possible collusion with the Trump campaign overseeing the platform? No, that is not normal. What is the best thing you think Donald Trump has done so far as president from a young American perspective?
Well, so far, I would say that the most important thing he's done is to order the start of the wall. I think that's very important to secure our border. We need to protect our citizens, and we need to know who is coming in and out of the country.
Yeah, I think he's done the best job of getting people more involved in the political process. Less people are watching videos on World Star Hip Hop and are finding out who their county legislator is.
One thing I love about Donald Trump is that he's deconstructing the administrative state. We've sold out our country to a bunch of technocrats, both on the Republican and Democratic side. And now Donald Trump is beginning to roll that back so that the government can really serve the people.
Yeah, you know, this was an election about jobs. Over 30% of young Americans still live with their parents. So I'm looking forward to him, you know, injecting some life back into our economy, lowering the tax rate, and getting our young people back to work, getting good jobs.
Let me put up something that a lot of people don't realize in terms of Donald Trump's success with young people. I mentioned this earlier, but it's really striking. The excitement on candidates for young American voters, right? Donald Trump supporters here, 32% basically told pollsters they were very excited. Only 18% of Clinton's young supporters there, under 30 millennials, excited. Does that surprise any of you, or what do you make of that?
doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, I think that we see on the Democratic side, there have been much more efforts to try to goad the base and get grassroots. That's why you need people like George Soros. You need Obama's shadow administration organizing for action to get the grassroots moving, when on the Republican side, it's genuine and people are excited about President Donald Trump.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Donald Trump is bold, he's brash, he's not afraid to address problems that everyone knows are true, but a lot of people have been too afraid to address in the past. Not only did he overperform with young people, but also minority communities. I mean, he got a larger percentage of the Black, Hispanic, and Muslim vote than Romney did in 2012. What has Obama done for minority communities in the last 8 years? Largely nothing. For far too long, Democrats have taken young and minority votes for granted while offering little in the way of policies that actually lift up those communities.
Paul, do you agree? What do you hear from people when you tell them that you're a Trump backer?
Oh man, it's crazy. Honestly, my father forbid me for saying the insults I received on social media, but literally, I think this is a great opportunity for people to just really get involved. I'm not really a big fan of listening to the static. I'm a big advocate of Winston Churchill when he said you won't get to your destination if you stop and throw rocks at the dogs that bark at you.
I want to play for you, you mentioned jobs, Kristen. I want to play for you a Trump supporter here. This was recently this week talking about plants closing. We've heard a lot about jobs. This is Lori Clements, who works as a meat cutter, and this is the view there.
It's getting to the point where if things don't turn around, the doors are going to close. And it's going to hurt a lot of people. I want to see him do what he says he's going to do. I want to see him make America great again. We've, the people of this country have lost a lot of faith in their government. The government has done a lot of things that weren't for the people.
Ellie, what specifically do you think he's done, though, so far to create jobs in the United States?
One major thing that President Trump did was he signed an executive action to get regulatory reform started. He's now empowered different heads of departments, heads of agencies to start this regulatory reform, which is going to ignite and unleash jobs, prosperity, and great things in America. We're really excited about it.
Do you think it's, I mean, you can't tell yet whether that's creating jobs.
Well, sure. I mean, the thing is that you have such an entrenched state, the federal bureaucracy is just so marred with the democratic laws that have been put on the books over the last 8 years. It's going to take time, but we're only 2 months in. And I think that President Trump has started with some really encouraging signs. And like I said, it's only going to get better from here.
On the dialogue, and next we're going to bring everyone out and have a whole joint discussion, but when you heard some of those questions there at the end of the segment with Resistance, starting with you, Nicole, do you have any response to anything that you heard? Did you think any of that was a fair question or fair criticism of President Trump?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily think it's fair. I think that, we are all very diverse people here. There's been a lot of negative talk about Trump supporters, and I think it's all very false. We're very open-minded, and, we support everyone, and I think we all just want what's best for the country.
Yeah, I agree. It's literally unfair for you to really justify and label someone based upon the worst of Donald Trump's rhetoric. I heard a lot about protesting and not really too much on how people are getting involved and basically changing the direction and taking the initiative individually to make America great.
On the point, because obviously it's no secret, there's been a lot of discussion of race and those issues. I'll put up one thing from Fortune magazine on the way Donald Trump's engaged folks. Here's the quote. Trump giving us the old wink wink, wrote Andrew Anglin, editor of a white supremacist website called The Daily Stormer, after Trump retweeted 2 other white genocide theorists within 1 minute. Whereas the old white genocide tweet could be a random occurrence, the odd one, I mean, it isn't statistically possible that 2 of them back-to-back could be random. It could only be deliberate. The stats there being that at least 75 users were wrapped up in that hashtag. I wonder what you make of that, any of you, because that's been a persistent criticism as well as the birtherism, and yet there are clearly young people who don't self-identify as being excited by that part of his appeal, but it was there.
One thing I don't think the president's gotten enough credit for is an executive action that he signed, Ari, to move the initiative on historically black colleges and universities from the Department of Education into the White House and assigned White House staff to work on it. This is something President Obama never did, and he took a lot of heat for this from outside groups because it was stuck in the Education Department. Now this is a real priority of the administration, so I think that we need to give the president a little bit more credit for some of the things that he's been doing.
Yeah, I think I heard from the liberal panel a lot of talk about rhetoric. rhetoric, right? Yeah, I don't like some of the stuff that Trump has said, but liberals have this obsession with diverting attention away from actual policies that matter and onto fluff and rhetoric. I'm sick of talking about rhetoric. Let's talk about policies here.
Do you think the words are PC? I mean, one of the people
Trump
who was
is politically incorrect. That's why everyone loves
So
him.
someone sitting in the chair you are, and we're going to bring you all together, but we wanted to hear everyone first, felt that the Access Hollywood tape, which exposed that language.
Okay, I didn't like the Access Hollywood tape. Trust me, I did not like that. But I care a lot more about the job market, the economy, getting a good healthcare system in place than I do about a 2005 tape of a conversation that Trump had in private.
Let me play a little bit of Donald Trump in the closing of the campaign, which is very interesting to look back at. You all say you were excited by him. You all were with him, right? And this was a time period when a lot of the country wrote him off wrongly. I mean, just at the mark of, was he likely to win? Could he win? A lot of people who had their smart money, thought they knew what they were talking about, wrote him off. You obviously didn't. Here was Donald Trump in the mood there, confident in Pennsylvania, where, again, people said he could never win, and really dissing or burning Hillary Clinton for relying on the celebrity thing again, which comes up a lot when we talk about young people. Take a listen.
I didn't have to bring J-Lo or Jay-Z, the only way she gets anybody. I'm here all by myself. Just me, no guitar, no piano, no nothing. But you know what we do have? And it's all of us, it's all the same. We all have great ideas and great vision for our country.
Well, I think that Hillary Clinton really steered away from getting involved and actually talking about policies, bringing people in to present ideas. She was bringing people in like LeBron James, J-Lo, a lot of these celebrities.
What did that say to you?
I think it's offensive. I think it's pandering. It's like her going to Power 105.1 and bringing a bottle of hot sauce on the airwaves.
Yeah.
So you felt that it wasn't her connecting with the community, but more assuming that would validate her or something?
No, I feel like she was trying to assume an identity and trying to be young and hip. It's like my 40-year-old, 50-year-old aunt coming in and saying, "Hey, Paul, what's popping? What's cool?" It's like it didn't look natural by her doing that.
Ellie, were you there in Pennsylvania? Do you remember that night?
I think I was there in Pennsylvania, and one thing that I remember was just the energy and the intimacy of that event and those events all across the country. That everybody in that room really felt like they had the opportunity to do something that they could never have the opportunity to do again for the rest of their lives. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and they did it.
Welcome back to The Point. We've just heard from two young, passionate groups about their hopes and fears for the Trump presidency. We had one group who says they want to stop the Trump agenda, the other hoping to see the president really fulfill all the promises he made. And now, here on The Point, on Growing Up Trump, this special segment, we brought them all together. Thanks again for being here. Blair, what did you think of what you just heard from those young Trump supporters right behind you?
I think that, one thing I want to say is that with Trump saying something in private, integrity is about not what you do in public, but what you do in private. And we want a president with integrity, and I don't feel that's something we have right now.
You don't feel that President Trump today has integrity?
I do not feel that.
Ellie?
Look, I think one thing that we need to understand going forward is that people really don't care about these certain issues that we try to make touch points. I think I heard the word nothing burger once on one of your shows, and this is just more nothing burgers that we continue to put out. The election's over, it happened, people voted on the merits, and they want to hear about jobs, they want to hear about infrastructure and immigration.
Amani?
Listen, Trump has the support that he does because fear-mongering is the political equivalent of clickbait. Obviously, it's going to work. Obviously, it's going to energize people. And the thing is, we've been throwing entire minority communities that are already targeted under the bus because of what? We want to talk about jobs? Like, what is the trade-off here? Like, we are literally saying that we can sacrifice an entire part of the fabric of our society just to continue elevating an already privileged part of America.
I would like to say that this is something that's really been happening in America before Donald Trump's presidency, and it's not really about white people attacking black people or Dominicans attacking Haitians. It's honestly happening amongst ourselves. So black people, we're attacking each other much more than a Caucasian is attacking the black community itself.
Yeah, I don't know about that necessarily, but I think what's important is that young people are doing more across racial lines, across gender. We don't necessarily have a traditional American set of values that our parents do. The millennial generation is the most diverse and progressive in American history, and we're going to get in the streets, we're going to run for office, and we're going to make change in our electoral process.
Nicole, take a look at some of the issues as a young woman who's been excited by Donald Trump. These are some of the issues that millennials, that people under 30 say they care about. Stressed about finances, 64%. Student loans making a big impact, 79%. Thinking that you have to tap into whatever little you've saved for retirement because things are so bad. What do you think Donald Trump's doing for that?
Well, Donald Trump has already talked about lowering taxes. He is reducing federal regulation. He's already made a law that says for every regulation that is proposed, they have to get rid of 2. So I think that helps businesses. You know, as millennials, we've kind of gotten used to the fact that it's difficult to find work. And I think that's a shame because that's not the way that the country has always been.
Jasiri's shaking his head.
Oh, absolutely, because not only, I mean, you're talking about jobs. This is a president that came out against a livable wage. You know what I'm saying? This is a president who, you know, it's easy to say that rhetoric is just rhetoric when the rhetoric isn't directed towards you.
Okay, minimum wage doesn't help. That just makes businesses able to hire fewer people. But I think I'm half Hispanic. You know, I have a lot of black friends. I have a lot of friends who are Jewish. I have all kinds of friends. They all want one thing, which is jobs, good jobs, not bad jobs. And you do that by making an economy that's flourishing and making it easier for entrepreneurs to hire people. We want to get the government off the back of people who are creating jobs in this country, and that's what Trump wants to do.
This is the same rhetoric that we heard under George W. Bush, and the whole economy almost really collapsed internationally. He did so bad on the economy that he wasn't even invited to the last 2 Republican conventions.
Something in medicine they call iatrogenics, I think we're seeing here. This is when you try to...
no idea what that means.
Well, it's when you harm when you're trying to help. And I think a lot of the liberal policies are very well-intentioned. You think of a minimum wage, and it kind of gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling, but it doesn't actually help. It ends up hurting. It hurts small businesses, and it hurts people who are looking for jobs and looking for that entry-level
But it certainly
point.
helps the people that are working at a minimum wage to make sure that they have food for their families.
Yeah, the ones who are able to keep their jobs. I mean, look at what's happening at McDonald's. You're already seeing them putting in machines in place of human workers because it is simply too expensive to keep hiring people. Liberals don't understand the difference between good intention and good policy.
Richie Dimple.
Yeah, so far, I mean, the Trump administration shows every sign of governing incompetently. I mean, the president promised a health care plan that would cover everyone, and instead he put forward a health care plan that, according to the Republican-picked Congressional Budget Office, would cost 24 million Americans their health insurance. And he was going to cut Medicaid by $800 billion and literally redistribute it for tax cuts for the rich.
By show of hands, I'm curious, how many of you at one point since, say, 22 have been on your parents' health care plans? Okay. So, say, Paul, like, is that something that you would worry about if they really do repeal? I mean, as you know, there's a big movement to just repeal the whole thing.
I think it'll be a really big disaster if we don't replace it with something that works. I currently work at White Plains Hospital in the emergency department, and we have an EMTAL, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, where we can't turn away a patient no matter if they can pay for their health insurance or if they have health insurance or their ability to pay. So I'm going to feel the brunt of this.
Do you think Donald Trump understands health care when he said, oh, no one knew it was this complex?
I believe I have the utmost confidence in his ability to surround himself with people that know health care. What a lot of people don't, this is going to be my mantra, kind of just getting people involved. Donald Trump is our president. He's our representative. He's not the person with all the answers. It's up to us to reach out through our congressman and try and help him make the best decision that works for us.
Nicole mentioned the wall. This immigration conversation was so huge. How do you feel about the fact that he's taken sort of 2 swings on the travel ban, and whether it's a perfect idea or not, none of it's implemented because it got blocked in the courts because of the way they rolled it out? Does that concern you from a competence perspective?
I don't think necessarily. I think, you know, he's working on it. It's a very new administration, and I have confidence in Donald Trump that he will get everything done that he said he would.
Yeah, you know, the first rollout or the first version of that plan was not well thought out. That's why they reintroduced it. But everyone understands what this is about. This is about keeping us safe. People have seen what's happened in Paris, what's happened in Europe. We don't want that here. So I think people understand, yeah, the first version of that bill was not great, but the intentions behind that bill are known, and I think they are working on it to iron out some of the problems.
So everybody will look like they want to get. So we're going to go down the line here. You guys go down the line, but then we'll get a response from Kristen as well. But go ahead.
I think that the propensity for Americans to say, oh, this makes us safe, you're completely ignoring the fact that we're not safe. We have mass shootings at a rate that no other country sees. It's ridiculous. And so to say that, oh, we have some foreign enemy of a different religion that's coming in to harm us, it's completely unfounded because we have violence in America, and it's often perpetuated by people who look just like the president.
Paul, and then back to the front.
This is why I was going back to my previous statement about, literally, I honestly think black-on-black crime is really underreported. We really want to shed light about about a police officer killing a black man, but we have cities such as Chicago where it's the normal. You don't even put it in the newspapers anymore. It's like at a
No,
bottom.
it's on the news all the time.
Yeah,
the violence in Chicago is definitely on the news. But also, black people who kill other black people go to jail.
Absolutely.
The reason that Black Lives Matter is in the streets is because there's no accountability for when police kill black people. That is the conversation that Black Lives Matter is having. It's not about the violence in the inner city.
You and then Jasiri.
I'm a strong advocate of basically the black community basically telling each other that Black Lives Matters, that you have other options as opposed to being ridiculed by being called white for being able to talk and articulate your thoughts in a professional way, that you have other options on the street as opposed to what's being pushed to you on the media airways.
Do you think Donald Trump hit the right balance in the campaign, that yes, police risk their lives and their lives matter, but a lot of black men, according to the data, are shot down in ways that other groups aren't? The data does show that.
I believe he could have done much, much more in terms of him getting the proper liaisons to address the message. I think it takes someone that you could really identify with to really, that you could really take the message from.
I just want to know where the All Lives Matter crew is. You know, where's the All Lives Matter crew when we're talking about building a wall and keeping people out, a wall that the United States is going to pay for, your taxpayer dollars to pay for, when it's, you know, white supremacists rising up and committing violence. We don't see Trump tweet about everything else, but he doesn't tweet about that.
We don't even see them when a white child gets killed by police.
Right. Girls are missing in D.C. We don't hear the All Lives Matter crew. I mean, you're talking about turning somebody away at a hospital that doesn't have health care. I thought this was a country based on Christian values. I mean, is that the type of society that we want?
Kristen and Richie.
Yeah, you want to talk about All Lives Matter. I think the one thing that Trump can do that we haven't even spoken about yet that will really help all lives is bringing in school choice. You know, in these inner cities that are plagued with violence right now, you're seeing minority children affected by poor education at a higher rate than all other children, and that's because they're not afforded the opportunity to go to the school of their choice. And you have these Democrat politicians like Obama sending their own kids to expensive private schools in limos while they deprive minority communities of school choice. These public schools are failing.
The limo might be a security thing. Just,
I
go ahead, Richie, and then Amani.
The point about immigration, I think one of the darkest moments in American history was when the United States turned away Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany. And as a result, many of those refugees died in the Holocaust. And now we find ourselves treating Syrian refugees with the same heartlessness that we did Jewish refugees a few decades ago. You know, what's supposed to distinguish the United States is the idea that all of us can become American regardless of whether we're born here, right? Immigration is at the heart of who we are as a country, and Donald Trump is an attack on that American idea.
Amani and Ellie.
Here's the thing, you know, almost humorously, we were talking about good intentions versus good policy, and yet we just spent the past 5 minutes listing out all of these failed policies that Trump has attempted to enact within his first 100 days alone that have obviously been embarrassing at how badly they have been. And the thing is, I don't care what kind of friends you have. If you're friends with Muslims or black people or whoever, if you're supporting someone who is exploiting those communities in order to get to where he wants to be in a position of power, then that is you renouncing our American values. Like, if we're talking about bad policies, we're at a historic low, not only with the approval ratings that Trump is suffering from right now at a national scale, but also with this travel ban, i.e. the Muslim ban, which was implemented solely to discriminate against an entire religious background from entering our country, completely contrary to the supposed values we're touting.
Ellie, and Kristen gets a response because she was cited. Go ahead.
Look, as a Jew, I find it astounding the myriad ways that Democrats find ways to connect what happened in the Holocaust to what's going on today in many different ways. The Syrian refugee crisis is absolutely not comparable to what happened with Jewish refugees. And I think what's encouraging is the fact that Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, has indicated that he wants to put up safe zones in Syria. Let's make sure that it's safe there.
Kristen?
Yeah, you know, I'm hearing a lot of anger and a lot of fear from the left. And I think to blame for that, I think we can point our fingers at the media that has gone out of its way to completely kind of, you know, distort a lot of Trump's policies. For example, the Muslim ban, it's not a Muslim ban.
But you are here in a setting by at least one media news organization that's tried to give a platform.
Exactly, and I'm so appreciative of that. But I think one great example is this notion that his travel ban is a Muslim ban. The most populous Muslim countries in the world are not even on this list.
For political reasons. But yet again, how is it that we have an exception to the Muslim ban for people that come from a Christian background.
Which was changed in the second ban.
Right.
Paul and then Richie.
Yeah, I was going to say that in regards to the current political climate, a lot of people are just so divided right now. A lot of people are in campaign mode and they're being obstructive, not even trying to work with President Trump. It's almost as if they're being 2008 Obama haters.
Well, honestly, the reason why people don't want to work with Trump, and it's not because people are comparing to the Holocaust for tragedy reasons. We're comparing to the Holocaust because we're in a moment in time right now where future generations are going to be asking how we let this happen, exactly in the same way that we're asking how the Holocaust took place, and that's the problem.
Big question. Richie, briefly.
We're referring to it as a Muslim ban because during the election he said that he wants to ban Muslims. So we're only judging him by his own words.
Show of hands, how many of you since the election have been at a march or a protest? And how many have done that, say, in March, in the last month? Okay, so staying high. Richie, as our young elected official, what do you think of the street part of this, which is different in social justice than just going to the voting booth?
Well, it shows that change has both an inside game and an outside game, and it puts the myth of millennial apathy to rest, because Donald Trump's election has set off a wave of demonstrations. There were millions of Americans who participated in the Women's March, not only in Washington, D.C., but in every major city across the country. And those demonstrations were largely driven by millennials.
You're shaking your head. Go ahead.
Well, I just think that, you know, it was so powerful to see the Women's March, but also to acknowledge the amount of people who have been participating in these marches. You know, I've been involved in, you know, Black Lives Matter style movements and in that type of activism. And so I'm really excited to see, like, kind of the uniting of forces of people who might have been more on the fence when it came to participating in activism. I wish there was more reliance on the wisdom of people who have been doing it, but I'm really excited to see the momentum of people being out there in the streets, people bringing pizza to these protests, and just, you know, coming out and supporting.
You contrast that, Jasiri, as someone who uses music. Hillary Clinton had a lot of musicians out. I don't know whether it helped or hurt her. We're going to play a little bit of Lady Gaga, who was big for her on the campaign trail. Take a listen.
It's an honor tonight for me to say, a 30-year-old woman from an Italian-American immigrant family, that I'm with her.
But as I mentioned, she did worse among young people.
Well, I think that, you know, I believe that just being a musician necessarily, because I like your music, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm somebody that's going to like or agree with your political thing. I think celebrity, just to be a celebrity, isn't something that is going to guarantee somebody to vote. I think you have to be intelligent, you have to understand the issues and be issue driven. I think people also look for people that have been out there. If you haven't been somebody that have been active and on the front lines in some of these protests, some of these movements, and you just get out there to say you're getting behind a particular candidate, then, you know, I kind of wonder how serious I can take you if I haven't seen you being on the front line of some of these issues in the first place.
Amani.
I mean, honestly, the statistics about white women voters doesn't really surprise me too much. We really have to consider whose backs this past election fell on, and it was entirely people of color. It was our livelihoods that were thrown under the bus, you know, in these debates and the discussions taking place. Many of us were excluded from those conversations, and of course, you know, a lot of people are saying that one of the positives from Trump's presidency is that it's rallied a lot of people together, it's gotten a lot of people in the streets, but you could have asked any person of color prior to the elections if racism was still a thing, and they would have gladly answered that question without us.
Yeah, I think that the election showed that young people want to participate in this, in politics and get out in the streets and do activism. They were doing that before the 2016 election. That's going to continue that was going to continue even if Hillary Clinton had been elected president. What I think Trump does is create a catalyst and really a sense of urgency that you have no choice but to get into the streets and continue your activism.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, you know, even if Hillary had won, and a lot of people like to, you know, imagine what it would be like and that it would be this wonderful, you know, kind of fantasy land. But honestly, there were a lot of issues with her policy platform, and I think that we'd still be doing this work. You know, the segments, you know, growing up Trump, but we grew up Obama, and there was still a, you know, a variety of issues to be fighting against, and that would, you know, be the case whether or not Trump was in office. I just think there's more energy behind it now.
And there may be more energy. One of the things we're going to talk about with the Trump folks coming up next is that young people who were Trump supporters were far more enthusiastic. Jasiri, listen to Donald Trump talk about his young support and even what he believed was some sort of Bernie overlap.
I'll go a step further. I think a lot of the young people that are with Bernie Sanders are going to come over to my side because they want jobs. They see what's happening. And Bernie Sanders and I agree on one thing, trade, that we don't know what we're doing on trade. The difference is I'll make great deals out of it. He doesn't know what to do.
I don't necessarily agree that it was just that, you know, his voters were energized and Hillary's weren't. Because to me, in my community, and what I saw was people energized mainly because, like, our lives are on the line. You know what I'm saying? Like, Trump's rhetoric has actually led to people being killed right now in the United States of America. We're here in New York City where a guy came to specifically target a black man and killed him. You know what I'm saying? So as I walk this street, I have to understand it. So I don't necessarily think that just because Trump was a celebrity or an apprentice, that this somehow meant that more people were energized by him or younger people were energized by him and not by Hillary. I dismiss that. I don't agree with that.
So Amani, what is the message to people who are newly engaged if they weren't excited before November?
I think it's important to center the voices of the people that are being impacted by these policies. I think that this is truly an opportunity for us to elevate narratives that have been marginalized, narratives that are really on the line right now with the current politics taking place around us. And I think it's important for us to make sure that movements are led by those people, that we're giving space to their voices, and allies that want to engage to do so in a way that actually is effective and progressive and contributing to the movement.
Richie, how old were you when you were first elected in New York?
25.
Okay.
Yeah.
In a rush. So what's changed for you or what you're seeing since then?
The stakes are much higher. Now we have a president who's intent on dismantling the social safety net. And in the New York City Council, I chair the committee that oversees the largest provider of affordable housing, the New York City Housing Authority. And that's the very first program that the Trump administration has targeted for budget cuts. Immediately, $75 million worth of budget cuts, which will translate into more mold, more leaks, more elevator breakdowns in public housing. So the stakes are much higher than ever before.
Last question for each of you, because we are doing some dialogue and we have some young Trump folks coming up next. What would you want to hear from them next?
I just want to hear a good reason why they're supporting Trump. I haven't heard one yet, and I want to hear one.
I would like to hear the truth. I definitely don't want to hear alternative facts. I want to hear real facts, and I want to hear real reasons why you would support somebody with a rhetoric like Trump.
I'm optimistic that they want to convert to our cause. So that's
Oh, you're here for conversion. Okay. Proselytizing is always hard.
Yeah, I mean, optimistically, I'd like to hear a rejection of this normalization of racism that we're seeing. But then again, I have high hopes.
Well, this is television. We always have high hopes.
I want to know how they were able to overlook the Access Hollywood tape that broke late in this campaign cycle. How were you able to go and vote for somebody who has spoken